And this show is sponsored by PowerfulWomenUSA.com. Hey, everybody, I'm Jill Conway. This is Secrets of Powerful Women, a show dedicated to celebrating strong and powerful women and sharing their stories. I'm hoping that you will be inspired and feel empowered and discover your own power. My guest today is Stacey Bell Lynn. You know Stacey's name and face because she was a TV news anchor on NBC here in New York City and News 12 Long Island. She is also married to an NFL coach and former player, Anthony Lynn. Stacey now hosts an incredible podcast called Superwives of the NFL, and she is here. Thanks for coming on the show, Stacey.
Thank you so much for having me. Congratulations. This is a very good thing that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And you have an amazing podcast too. So this is so we're live on the radio now at 103.9 FM, but it's also a podcast. So anything you'll say will live on.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yes. So I want to talk about the podcast, of course, which I've listened to and I love. But before that, we need to get into, you. And you had a very successful career, which landed you in the #1 market in the country, New York City. Now, did you always want to be a journalist, and how did your journey start?
Always. I can't think of anything else that I ever wanted to do, maybe except to be a teacher, because I don't know, I think every young child maybe dreams of being a teacher, and there were a bunch of teachers in my family. But I knew at a very young age what I wanted to do. And I was really lucky and blessed that when I went to college and majored, I'm from a small town in Arkansas, this journalist took me under her wing.
Wow.
And I got an internship at the local PBS station. And from there, the rest was history. Started my career in Texarkana, Texas.
Wow.
Moved to Shreveport for a few years. I was single, and then moved to Cleveland. And I lived there for about 10 years before I finally met my husband. So, yes, short answer, I can't think of anything else that I've ever wanted to do.
Right. So, okay, so that's where you met your husband, and then you moved to New York?
Yes, we were both single, obviously. He was recently divorced, and I had been living there for a long time. I lived in Cleveland for 13 years, so
Wow.
that's really my second home.
Yeah.
And some friends fixed us up on a blind date.
Wow.
And yeah, we dated for, what did we date? We dated for 2 years. Then 2 years into us dating, he got fired. He didn't get fired. His head coach got fired.
Right.
Such is the business. So his head coach got fired, and then he moved to New York to work with the Jets, and we dated long distance, and then got engaged, got married, and then I made the move to Long Island.
Wow. Wow, that's hard. Gosh, you've moved around. They always say, football players move around, but you were doing the same as a lot of journalists do.
Yeah, we did the same. There's a joke that the NFL stands for not for long. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I guess unless you're, Bill Belichick. But yeah, we moved around a lot. So we were lucky, we were really blessed. We were in New York. He was with the Jets for 5 years, which, in this life is a really good stint.
Sure. Now, I was listening to your podcast, and in it you say that you never watched football before. You really love the commercials and the snacks, and that's pretty much as far as it went. That's my speed, too. I don't really watch much. But so what was it like for you entering this world, this NFL world?
Intimidating. Yes, very intimidating, because we met later in life. We were, in our mid-30s. So I wasn't one of those girls who had been with him since he was 20, or since we were in high school. So it was really intimidating. You're coming into these games with the Jets at the time, and, here's, Jimmy Schottenheimer and her family, and that name, and, there's DeBrickashaw Ferguson and his wife, and, Bart Scott and his wife. So it was really intimidating.
Sure. So how did you manage that? I mean, that's right, to be intimidated, and then you're like, this is a whole new world. This is a whole new way of life. And it had to, what was the hardest part of it all?
Ooh, the hardest part was just not knowing anyone. And then there was so much glitz and glamour, and just, you question, do I measure up because I don't go to the games with an Hermes bag, but I just decided I had to be myself, and I met great women who took me under their wing, and we're still friends today.
Yeah.
So I just said, I'm going to go in and I'm going to be myself. That was how I, made it work.
Right. And it's not this glamorous life, I think, right? No life is when you think about, you always think, oh, well, oh gosh, she's married to a football player. She's married to a big time coach. Life must be so easy. But in reality, is life ever easy for anyone,
Right. You see, like the exterior of what's happening, and there is a lot of glamour to it. You get to do a lot of cool things. You meet a lot of cool people. Your husband makes a great salary. Every once in a while they do a wives trip, and you can fly on the team plane, which is really cool. But you're constantly moving around. Your husband is gone a lot, especially if he's a coach. My husband, the alarm goes off at 6:30. I don't see him again most nights until 9:30, 10 o'clock.
Oh, wow.
So imagine if you have kids, your kids never see their dad until the weekends. So it's not, and I don't want to sound, I get that these are first world problems, but I think there are a lot of things that aren't as fabulous as they seem.
Right. Well, it's hard, I would think, obviously, with kids, but it's also hard, as a woman without kids, and you're there and you're kind of by yourself. So it can be lonely, I would think.
It can be. I think you have to be the type of person who is okay with spending a lot of time by yourself, whether that's you're independent or you're a loner. I'm a little bit of both.
Me too.
I remember when so it works. When we first started dating, like I said, I had lived in Cleveland for 13 years, and he said, you're never going to have this again. So you have to be okay with constantly moving because we will never live somewhere else for 13 years.
Wow.
And, so it's turned out to be true. Right. But I think you have to have something for you as a woman, whatever that thing is, because they're at work, they're doing their own thing. And then when they come home, they're exhausted. So
did you take a pause when really think about that question when he asked you that? That's hard. Yeah. You had a whole life. I mean, you have a whole life of, you were on the news, you were very successful. So that's got to be okay. Obviously what it's like to be in the public eye, but not under that kind of microscope, I would think.
No, I did take a pause because I had such a good life there. I had friends who were like family. I had a great job. My job wanted me to stay. So, I did take a pause, but I thought our relationship was worth it, and it turned out that it was.
Right. So now your podcast is called Superwives of the NFL. It's on Apple, everybody.
Yes.
You take us behind the scenes of what life is like, married to famous coaches and players, and you call it a sisterhood, and I absolutely love that. But tell us why it is.
Oh, goodness. That's a good question. Why is it a sisterhood?
Well, because it could be, when we think about it, it could be a very catty situation. But what you describe, it doesn't seem that way at all.
No, because we're all in it together, and no matter what you're going through, there's some other person who knows what you're dealing with, and they know that you are managing it alone. You're not, I think one of the reasons I wanted to do this is because, I'm a reporter anchor by nature, so I love a good story, and I love a good human interest story. But I remember talking with a bunch of women, and they were sharing their stories about, requests for tickets, and, we have so much company in the house every weekend, and how do we manage this? And I thought, these are the same things that we're dealing with, but I thought it was just me. Right. It never occurred to me other people were dealing with these same issues. So, it's really a sisterhood. There is an episode that I have coming up with, her name is Mercedes Kosheri. We've become very good friends. Her husband was a very successful player with the Jets, Jericho Kosheri. And don't ask me positions because I don't know. But
it's okay. I won't ask you. Although I'm sure someone's listening like, oh, I know.
I know him.
Right.
But when they had their first child, they adopted. And so she said she had nothing for her home, for the baby. When she came home, someone else on the team had bought everything that she needed for her nursery and had the nursery completely set up with everything she needed when she got home.
Wow.
And she said there were things that I didn't even know what they were, let alone that I needed them for the baby.
Right.
But someone else with the team had taken care of the entire nursery without even telling her.
Oh,
you know, those are the kind of things when you think it's catty, and I'm sure there's cattiness, but there's so many stories like that behind the scenes.
Right. And so that's kind of like my question. Like, it's such a different. I mean, I can see the next Bravo show to be this, right? But
I would love that.
from your lips to God's ears, right?
Yes.
But so when you think about that and you're like, I want to share this world, I want to share this the sisterhood. Did that come to you then? Did you did you share it with the other women and they say yes? What was the reaction, or what? And more so, what was your husband's reaction?
His reaction was, how does this affect me?
Right.
And that is a direct quote. How does this affect me? Because I think, the guys fear that they don't want anything said, even if it's innocent, that could be embarrassing, or there's a soundbite that will live that somebody misconstrues.
Right.
I have a very good friend who's her husband. He's a defensive coordinator with a team, but he is one of the guys who keeps being mentioned as being a head coaching candidate. And she said, look, we trust you, but we can't run the risk that I say something that is completely innocent and it's misconstrued and it affects him next year when he's going on interviews. And I said, okay, I get it. I respect it. Right. But to answer your question about how it came about, I actually have wanted to do this since, oh my goodness, I would say 2017.
Wow.
I've thought about it for a long time.
That's a great idea. It is a great idea.
Yeah. And I think I just had a bit of, I don't know, I felt like, am I qualified to do it? Which is such a crazy thing to say, given my background. Am I qualified to do it? I wasn't married to him when he's a player. He's not, a long-time head coach. Why should I do this? And it took a friend of mine who is an agent saying, these are your stories. You are qualified to tell them.
Isn't it crazy? I listen to you and I feel like we always do that to ourselves. We're like, should I do it? Am I qualified? And when it's like, oh my God, Stacey, of course you're qualified, right? But we do this to ourselves. We have that horrible doubt that just rears its ugly head, that negative voice.
I told another friend of mine, I said, she said, what are you afraid of? And I said, well, what are people going to say? Are they going to talk about me? And she said, I know you haven't figured this out, but they're going to talk about you anyway. So why not just do it and see what happens?
Ooh, right. I mean, that's so true.
Yeah.
That's so true. Well, what are they really going to say? Stacey was in the news forever and now she has a podcast about, really? Is that such a far stretch? And I love that you do this. So we'll talk about that. You left news. Where were you? What were you doing and why did you decide to leave news?
So, I was living in New York, New Jersey. I was working for WNBC. What was I doing? I was anchoring. It was my second stint there. I actually did 2 stints there. The first, when I left Long Island, I went to WNBC to anchor weekends. Okay. And then I did that for about 2 years, and he took a job in Buffalo. We went with Rex Ryan to Buffalo. Okay. So I quit, broke my contract. They were great. They let me leave. Wow. And about a year later, I ended up going back. So I was commuting back and forth from Buffalo to New York just to do a weekend, staying in a hotel while he worked. Wow. So they finally said, we want you to come back full time and anchor our 5 p.m. So the short version, I was anchoring the 5 p.m. As that was happening, he got a job in Los Angeles with the LA Chargers. He was their head coach.
Oh, my goodness.
So he moved to LA and I stayed in New York. And funny story, when I interviewed for the job, the GM said, we want you here for at least 3 years. He said, I don't want you to come back to me in 6 months and say, your husband's taking a job in San Francisco, you have to move. Oh. So 6 months later, when Anthony got the job, I went in and I said, hey, Eric, it's not San Francisco, but pretty close, actually.
And what was the reaction?
He just kind of laughed and shook his head. I said, but I'm not leaving. We're going to do long distance. So we did long distance for about 3 years, and the station was great. They bent over backwards to accommodate me. My routine was I would anchor the 5 p.m. on Friday. Then I would bolt to Penn Station and get the train either to JFK or Newark, fly out to L.A., get in there at around midnight. So we'd have Saturday, Sunday for the game, and then most Mondays I would fly back early in the morning on Monday.
Oh, my goodness.
So we did it for 3 years.
Wow. Oh, gosh, Stacey,
So,
that's hard. That's
tough. I couldn't do it now, and I'd look back on it, and I think, gosh, how did I do that? I mean, it was just, I don't know if it was adrenaline or you just don't think about it. You just do it.
Well, right. And obviously you didn't want to walk away from that position, and your relationship meant the world to you. So you have to make it work,
did.
right?
Yeah, so we did. We made it work, and he was great. He was wonderful. I mean, I remember him even saying, it's actually kind of good that you're not here, because he was never home, and he said, I would feel guilty if you were here.
Right.
He just, he would spend the night at the office a lot, which is very common in our world, too.
Right. Oh, okay. Okay. Which is, again, a very difficult thing to get used to. I'm married to someone in law enforcement for years, so it's, when they're working night shifts and overnights, you don't see them and the kids don't see them, or it's hard to, once you find your own groove, I feel like it gets easier. Once you find your routine, it works. But there are times where you're like, I wish someone was around,
No, that's very much the case. Yeah, you do. And I do think, too, there were a lot of things in news that prepared me for this lifestyle and this job without even realizing it. I moved around a couple of times as a single person. I was always the new person in the newsroom who had to go in and make friends. And, you're cheering each other on in the newsroom. Oh, great story, great interview, which is the same thing you do in this life. So there were a lot of things with my news career that prepared me for this.
What do you think? I mean, like, the best part, I should say, of being a part of this, the wives of the NFL? What would be like the greatest part of it?
I have met some really cool people who are lifelong friends.
Yeah.
Yeah, just people that I never would have thought were so cool. And the things that you get to do, the trips to London, every now and again, you get to fly on private planes. That, I'm not going to lie, that's really cool.
Sure.
But just, the really sweet people that, I've met, like from our time with the Jets, we still do a group text, and there are 16 of us in this text. That every birthday is happy birthday. If there's a big win, it's, congratulations. We couldn't win it. I'm glad you guys did. Just, you meet some of the nicest, coolest people. So just the relationships that you form. How
does that work? I mean, when obviously your husbands are on different teams, competing teams, does it ever get a little dicey? Does it ever get a little strained?
Not really, not at all, because, everybody wants to win. Right. Somebody has to lose. So if it can't be us, I'm always happy when it's, some of our friends. It never gets, because everybody's pretty respectful in how we deal with each other when there's a loss. And I think I recounted this story in our podcast. We were in Detroit for a year. I would have to think about all the places that we've lived in the past 6 years. Yeah. But we spent a year in Detroit, which is a great city. We met just some of the coolest people there. And so last year, we were with the San Francisco 49ers, and it came down to the game where one of us would move on to the Super Bowl. And so my friend and I with the Lions texted each other before the game, good luck. After the game, she was the first text that I got saying, that hurt. Hey, we couldn't get it done, but congratulations, I'm rooting for you. Same thing with some of my good friends. They won the Super Bowl with the Chiefs. Right. God, it sucked to not win. But I thought, you know what, I got to suck it up and send her this text because, I'm happy for them.
Yeah, sure. And that's, obviously you want to be happy, and you guys are, removed a little bit where you don't want that to jeopardize a friendship at all.
Absolutely not. No. And I think that's a good point. So when you come together, even during the season or after the season, it's all good. We make jokes about it, we laugh, and we move on.
I was one of your podcasts, you interviewed someone, and they said that, it's especially hard, as we were mentioning, when, a woman's alone and they enter this world, and that it seems like so many in the wives community there just kind of open up and realize and welcome them in and make that extra effort, which is really beautiful.
It is, and I think because so many of us have been there, I talked about this too. The first game that I went to, we were still dating. He was with the Jets. I had flown in from Cleveland. I didn't know a soul.
Right.
So I navigated my way to the stadium by myself. I sat by myself next to strangers.
Wow.
And the next game, after the game or the next game, he said, hey, somebody's wife wants your number because they want to text you so you can come and sit with them. They don't want you to sit by yourself. And never again have I had to be by myself. They just kind of took me under their wing.
Oh, my gosh. That's a lovely story. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we're coming up on the commercial break. But so after the break, we'll be back with Stacey Bell Lynn, the former news anchor and host of Superwives of the NFL podcast. After the commercial, the link will be on my podcast and website. You're listening to Secrets of Powerful Women. Join the community. Head to Powerful Women USA for more information and follow us Instagram, Facebook, Spotify. We're now on Apple and YouTube. We'll be back. Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Secrets of Powerful Women. Stacey Bell Lynn is here, and she is hosting a new podcast called Superwives of the NFL. And it is a great podcast if you get a chance to listen to it. So, Stacey, welcome back.
Thank you.
So, what is the best guest that you've had? Who's the best guest you've had on the podcast so far? I know you're probably all friends with them, but is there something that you learned about one or two of them that you didn't know before?
I would say my best guest is my friend Jimmy Schottenheimer. Her husband is the coordinator for the Cowboys, and we have been friends with them since the Jets.
Okay.
And they knew us before we were married. And so for us, we were just having a conversation. So I think she was the best. Goodness, I didn't learn anything that I didn't know, except that a couple of the girls who were players' wives, I didn't think they knew who I was, but we were all kind of admiring each other from afar.
Oh.
So that was the cool thing in terms of like talking to. I spoke with I mentioned Mercedes Kosheri and Pamela Davis. Her husband still plays for the New Orleans Saints. But they've all been great. I have one coming up with a buddy of mine from the San Francisco 49ers who she is also an actress. So it was really cool. Like I knew she was doing some acting, but it was really cool just sitting around the house one day watching a Lifetime movie, which I probably shouldn't admit, and then pops up on the screen. So they've all been very interesting. I still have some dream guests who are a little bit nervous about doing it, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Now, is it harder now that you're a coach's wife, is it harder, or you have been, really, is there the same relationship with other coaches' wives as opposed to players' wives? Do you all intermingle, or some coaches' wives kind of stay off to the side with their coaches type of thing?
I feel like it's different with every person. You often intermingle because we do a lot of events together. You have luncheons together. We have a charity event next week. So there's that intermingling. But I do think for a lot of times socializing, and maybe it's just a factor of age, I socialize mostly with other coaches' wives.
Right.
And that was the thing another friend of mine shared. Her father-in-law had been a very successful coach, and he's since passed, but he didn't believe in coaches and players socializing and intermingling.
Yeah.
But I think now it's different. You do tend to socialize with each other a little bit more.
Right. You often talk about, and you mentioned it a few times, being a part of the Jets family. So was that, you were there the longest, you said?
We were there the longest. That was also my introduction as far as being a wife and really being included in things. I feel like it's a little bit different now, but back then you didn't get the invite to go to all of the luncheons and to go on the trips if you weren't officially a fiance or a wife. Now it's more inclusive and they include girlfriends. But that was my first experience of being included and being a part of things. And it was just such a unique experience where it felt like a family. Everybody socialized, you hung out together, you knew everybody's kids. It was just, and there are a lot of teams that I feel like have that. We actually have it now with the Commanders. But I think because that was my first experience, it was so impressionable on me. It made such an impression. And I also think because I was new to it, people just really wrapped me up. So it meant a lot. It really did.
Right. When you were first, serious with your now husband, were there people who were well-meaning, but kind of tried to give you some advice, like to not maybe get involved, in that world or anything like that? Well-meaning.
There were, and they were well-meaning. But yeah, there were people who were like, "Ooh, are you sure you want to marry somebody in the NFL? Are you sure you want to date this guy?" Or, I remember somebody at my old job, it got back to me that someone had made a comment, "Oh, they're not going to stay together. Like when he moves, they're going to be done."
So nice.
So, yeah,
these nice comments.
Like that. Yeah,
right, exactly.
Nice comments, yeah.
Well, what do you think? I mean, you've been married now how many years?
How long? 13 and a half. I forget. But yes, 13 and a half.
Don't let him hear that, right?
He can't remember either.
So what's the secret to having a successful marriage with someone who is a big part of the NFL?
Oh, I think trust. You have to trust the person. You have to have faith. Our faith is very important to us. But, I trust him. I believe he trusts me. And I would never want to be the person who hindered him from reaching his dreams or going for it. And I think he would say the same thing about me. Like, I don't want to be the person who says, I hate this job. I hate that you're gone all the time. If you feel like this is your passion, then I respect you enough that I want you to pursue it.
Right.
Don't, sell yourself short because of me. So yeah, our faith, our trust for each other and just our desire to see each other succeed as individuals, and no matter what we decide to do. I had the freedom to leave my job. He never encouraged me to do it. He actually tried to talk me out of it because he thought I would miss it. So we just, we respect and support each other.
Right. No, so that's my question, because I sometimes miss it. Do you sometimes miss news? Would you ever go back?
I would never say never. Right now, I don't miss it. You know what I miss, Jill, honestly? I miss the camaraderie. I miss the camaraderie, and I miss, like, during a political season or when current events are happening, you're sitting around and there are all of these different opinions and perspectives and all of this different input from people from various parts of the country and races and religions. That is what I miss. But do I miss working on holidays? Never. Do I miss working on weekends? Never.
They think news is such a glamorous life too, and it's like, when you getting up super early on a Saturday or something, right?
Exactly. I know on Long Island we didn't, but at WNBC we had hair and makeup. I've missed that sometimes. I miss like waking up and just having someone make me look gorgeous. But no, I got to live my dream for a very long time, and so I have no regrets, and no, I don't miss it at all.
Well, you were in it for, 2 decades, 20 years, and that's pretty much, I was in it for 20 years as well, and I feel like at that point, I felt like I kind of burnt out a little bit, because you're just giving it all, and you're like, it's heavy sometimes.
It is, and you're not going to be successful in news if you're not giving it 110%.
Right.
And you're right. You burn out, and there's so much more required now because, with the social media and more people are doing, I know at News 12, they do a lot of news, but like all of the other networks are doing that too. So you're on the air more. So, and it was just difficult, with his job, because I would go into a station, I would get acclimated, I'd make friends, and a year or two later, he's saying, okay, gotta go.
Right.
We moved to Detroit for a year, and I had a news director there, that my whole news director in Cleveland, who wanted me to come back and work for him. We talked about it. And I said, I just can't do it, because he might come home in a year or two and say, let's go. And that's exactly what happened.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
So, moving from team to team, it's kind of like the first day of school every couple of years,
Right.
you have to kind of build a tougher skin. I mean, you have a tough skin, obviously, if you're in news, right?
Right.
But I mean, it's hard. It's difficult to meet people and just, hey, I'm here, you know? Yeah. Well, I mean, what advice would you give to, women, young women who they're dating football players in college, and those football players are going to be drafted, or are being drafted? What advice would you give to them, about this whole world of the NFL?
Number one, you've got to have your faith in the stability in your relationship. Your foundation can't be football. It has to be something else. And secondly, you always have to just be willing to go in and put yourself out there and meet people and make friends. You cannot think that you're different from these women, that you're not like them, because that's why it's a sisterhood. We're all going through the same thing. So have your foundation in something else and be willing to put yourself out there and meet people and make friends. We had our first event here. This is our first year with the Washington Commanders, and I didn't know anybody here.
Right.
I take that back. I knew maybe one person.
Right.
But I got here, and Anthony said, "Oh, I want you to go meet so-and-so's wife. They live in our building, and you two are going to go have wine tonight." Like, okay, thanks for hooking me up on an adult play date.
Right. But someone's got to sometimes, right?
Someone has to, yeah. So she and I hung out for the entire, the first game. That was my pal. We hung out together. We sat together. We rode to the game together. And by the end of it, we were both like, oh, my goodness, I'm so glad you were here.
Right.
But had I gone in with a stank attitude, like, I don't want to meet this woman, I'm not hanging out with her, you can't, that's not going to net you anything.
Sure. Well, it's funny. All right. So when you talk about and your attitude and everything, so, that I want to ask a question about like all that, football, it's such an amazing sport, and it's it's such a huge industry, but it's also, it's violent, it's aggressive, there's concussions. It's always a big concern. Is there any, and I'm not asking about the players, but is there any program or a support system in place that helps the wives cope with all the mental, because the games is a mental game too, the mental health aspects of the husband, like depression after a poor performance or highs and lows. I mean, I've seen it at my son's level, at the high school level, so I can only imagine what it's like at the professional level. And they come home after a game and things didn't go well. How do you guys cope?
Well, we are, I don't know, my husband Anthony's been doing this for so long. If there's a loss, he's not mean. He's very quiet, and he doesn't really want to socialize. So I just know that, I have to give him a little space. I don't ask 20 questions. I don't say things like, why didn't you kick for 2 points instead of, whatever. But you just give him his space. You give him their space. There is a private group on one of the social media sites that very specifically deals with women who are dealing with husbands who have CTE, and they're dealing with retiring and just whatever issues go along with that.
Right.
So there is a private page where you can address your questions to someone in private anonymously, and they steer you towards resources and other people who are dealing with the same thing to help you.
Oh, that's fantastic. Because I would think, that's a lot to deal with. I mean, they're so intense. I mean, you see the fans, gosh, but I mean, they're intense, but the players, it has to weigh heavy on them too, and how do you process all of that? And right. I mean, wow, that's a lot. And as a wife, how do you just deal with that?
To deal with it. Yeah,
for sure.
I think the hardest part sometimes is, if when the season ends, if you're in a playoff run and you lose, and then, you have to deal with the fact that it's just over. It's over. I don't have anything to do with my time. Or when you get fired, that's another one. Like, we've lived through him getting fired, and that was a lot to process.
Sure.
But, we saw it coming, so we've kind of been preparing ourselves. But then, like I said, there are always other people who have been there.
Right. Right.
So, yeah.
Well, that's an amazing network then. I mean, because that's what you want, someone to say, I've been there, and so here's what you kind of guide you through it. Right.
Right.
Because
and
otherwise,
there's always someone willing to do that, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. So, I want to talk about, you do have a foundation, the Lynn Foundation, and giving back is obviously very important to you. So tell us what you do with the foundation.
It is, thank you so much for asking. It's
Yeah.
the Lynn Family Foundation. We actually started it not with a friend. I'll give you the backstory. When we lived in Long Island City in Queens, we met a very good friend there, lifelong friends, and he and Anthony decided they wanted to give back to help build a school in Africa.
Wow.
So we started the foundation, Anthony and I did, to raise money to help build a school and a library in Africa. So now my stepdaughter runs the foundation, but we fund the school in Africa. We have a boys group in L.A., Young Warriors. They're fatherless boys, and we support their mentor group. We have a group in Texas that we work with, the Betty D. Gonzalez Foundation. They're also in Detroit, motherless daughters, girls whose moms are not in their lives or have passed. And then we have another initiative, which is it's called Hugs Cafe, and it's a cafe where children, or I should say adults with disabilities, work as waiters and waitresses and cooks. So we kind of cast a wide net and do a lot of things, but it's been really, really rewarding and something that as a family we're all very passionate about giving back.
Well, I mean, you seem like obviously you believe in a greater power, and that's very important to you. So so all of it goes hand in hand. So that's a beautiful thing. And on one of your podcasts you talked about, I think you said that is it you or your husband thinks it's important to, it should be more important to teach financial literacy to kids. And I think that's a very important thing to teach too.
I agree. And, look, I get teachers are dealing with a lot. Like I said, I have a lot of teachers in my family, but, especially for him, like coming into the NFL and not coming from a family with money, there were a lot of things he had to teach himself or he had to learn from other people, and he's seen a lot of players deal with it. And so, he's very passionate about at some point developing a platform or a program where we can start teaching and mentoring young people about money and managing their finances. Right.
Well, that's incredible.
And he's adamant that, I'll say, well, I think inner city kids need it the most. And he'll say, no, every kid needs to know how to do this. It's not just inner city kids. And he's right.
Right. Well, there are people that might need a few extra hands, a few extra lessons than other people, certainly.
Yes.
I'm sure my husband would say, I need some financial help as well to listen, watch the books a little bit better. But tell me about the school in Africa. How many kids do you have there? That's incredible.
I can't remember the number off the top of my head because it's we go up to 8th grade. So it's called the Promise Village Academy, and it's in what is called the bush outside of Tanzania. We were actually able to go for a visit there about 5 years ago. But it's so different there because, and look, there's need everywhere. But, they live in huts, but this is all they know. So it's normal But, they weren't being taught how to read. They had to go to school at certain times of the day so that they wouldn't get attacked by animals. So we were able to work with a group there, classrooms, computers, desks, books, the library. We added a playground. We were able to install a water well, so they have running water. So just to see the video of them fascinated by the water coming out of the water fountain and them drinking from it, because otherwise they'd have to go get the water from somewhere. Wow. So that has really, really been rewarding. For sure.
Yeah. Well, let's go back quick to the news. So, because I always like to ask women, when you've had such a successful career as you have, what is your advice to younger people who want to get involved in news? What would you say to that?
I would say don't sell yourself short and just go for it. Know that it's going to be a difficult career. Not difficult, but it's different. You're going to have to sacrifice some things and give up some things. You're not going to make every family get together. You can't go on every trip. But it's so rewarding, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. And so I would say just go for it, be prepared to move, and, just do it. I have no regrets. Know what you're getting yourself into, and do it while you're young and energetic and you don't mind working on Christmas.
What? How many stations did you work at, Stacey?
Oh, my gosh. 1, 2, Cleveland, let's see, Long Island, WNBC. It seems like 5. I feel like it was more, but there had to be 6. So I would say 6 stations. Yeah.
Right. And so you moved around. That was a lot. And then you married someone, and now you're still, it's almost like a military family. You keep moving every couple of years, right?
You know what? That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
What it is. Yeah.
And I don't think people take that as seriously enough, because that's not something I ever really thought about, right? I never even thought, I mean, I knew obviously that players are traded and, go to different teams, but you don't often think, right? They have to, you, as wives and girlfriends, you have to pick up everything start over. I mean, everything from doctors to, did you ever fly back to like the other hometown because you're like, I really like that doctor. I'm going to just stay with that doctor.
I'll be in New York Wednesday because I kept my dentist there. So yeah, look, I need financial literacy too, because that's not the smartest move, but yes.
Well, because, right? I mean, when we love our certain people, if you love a doctor, you're like, gosh, I'll fly there. Why not?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I have one doctor in Buffalo, and we were joking the other day. She's my longest relationship with a doctor because we've been seeing each other for 8 years. So, but we can mostly do telemed now, so it works. But yeah, and I wanted to point out too that players have a much more stable career than coaches.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're making it work. And now with this new podcast and hopefully a TV show out of it soon, it'll really, really expose everyone to this world, that it's this wonderful community of women, powerful women who work to help each other.
Well, and that's, as you said, from your lips to God's ears. Yeah. I would love for that to happen because, I think that there are some great stories here that resonate with a lot of women, and maybe even for that matter, a lot of men. And it doesn't always have to be about the glitz, the glamour, the fashion, the drama. Just human interest stories that other people can relate to and be inspired by.
Oh, I love it. All right. Well, this is the end of the show, and I want to thank you, Stacey Bell Lynn, for coming on the show. Thanks a lot, Stacey. Listen to our podcast, everybody, Superwives of the NFL. It's on Apple, and it really is a great behind-the-scenes look, as she was saying, of what life is like married to someone in the NFL. You've been listening to Secrets of Powerful Women. If you're interested, receiving my newsletter, head to powerfulwomenusa.com. Follow me, Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, all that jazz. I'm Jill Conway. Thanks for listening to Women Empowering Women. We are stronger together. See you next time.